Pokemon Sun and Moon were the last games in the Pokemon series to get updated versions, those being Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. The quote-unquote third version of Pokemon games has been around ever since Pokemon Yellow on the Game Boy, which then extended to Pokemon Crystal, Pokemon Emerald, and Pokemon Platinum. They broke the mold with Black 2 and White 2 rather than the Pokemon Gray we were all expecting, but it was essentially the same thing. Gen 6 famously didn't get Pokemon Z to follow X and Y, though Redemption is coming soon. And of course, we got Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which follow Black 2 and White 2's lead, being a dual release, but act more like a third version than a sequel. People were definitely starting to get fed up with buying new versions of basically the same game, so with the release of the Nintendo Switch, we saw Sword and Shield take what I believe was a pretty good step forward, implementing post-launch DLC rather than, Pokemon Gun. Scarlet and Violet, of course, followed in Sword and Shield's footsteps with the DLC, and I don't see things changing anytime soon. And so finally, that begs the question. What if Sun and Moon were the first games to get DLC instead of Sword and Shield, and what would that DLC look like? Well, today I'm here to discuss just that, and I would love to hear your ideas and opinions in the comments. I try to respond to as many as I can. With all that said though, let's go ahead and get right into the video. Of course, I could technically just bullshit whatever DLC I want to, but I want this to be as close to official as I can, as if it was real DLC. And to figure out what Sun and Moon's theoretical DLC would look like, we need to take a look at the DLCs we currently have and formulate some ideas from there. Sword and Shield's DLC was released in two parts, the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra, which take place in two new locations and heavily feature new legendary Pokemon. The Isle of Armor stars Kubfu/Urshifu, while the Crown Tundra stars Calyrex and its steeds Glastrier and Spectrier. The Crown Tundra is noticeably more expansive than the Isle of Armor, with more new legendaries including Regidrago and Regieleki, and even new regional variants of the legendary Birds of Kanto. Scarlet and Violet's DLC, on the other hand, actually has three parts: the Teal Mask, the Indigo Disc, and Mochi Mayhem. But since Mochi Mayhem is an epilogue, and there's no epilogue in Sword and Shield, we're not going to worry about it for this video. The Teal Mask takes place in the land of Kitakami, and is centered around Ogerpon and the Loyal Three, while the Indigo Disc centers around Terapagos and visiting the Blueberry Academy in Unova, as well as introducing new Paradox Pokemon, which are kind of parallels to the new Regis and Galarian form birds. I also want to point out here, if it isn't obvious, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon don't exist in the universe with Sun and Moon DLC, so any content from those games is fair game. Now we can compare everything we've talked about so far and start to formulate our Sun and Moon DLC. The first rule is that it has to release in two parts, each centering around a legendary or legendary group. The second part of the DLC will be more expansive, so the legendary will be more important to the overall story. For example, Terapagos is more important than Ogerpon in the overall story of Scarlet and Violet. Each of these parts though will of course need a name. So I've decided to dub the two parts of Sun and Moon's DLC, drumroll please, Part 1, The Soaring Earth, and Part 2, The Dark Star. Let's dive into these further. The Pokemon DLC names so far actually follow pretty strict naming conventions. The Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra both include items, armor and crown, to go along with the names Sword and Shield. And as a side note, they also both state where the DLC takes place, an isle and a tundra. The Teal Mask and Indigo Disc do the exact same thing, having colors, teal and indigo, to go along with the colors Scarlet and Violet. And this time, both names have an item, a mask and a disc. So, for Sun and Moon, I decided the names have to include celestial bodies, hence Earth and Star. For the matching second half, I decided to go with oxymorons. I did this because in Sun and Moon, even though Solgaleo is the sun Pokemon, instead of creating the sun, it canonically is the devourer of the sun, doing the opposite of what you'd expect, and infamously not being a fire type to go along with that. And same with Lunala not being a dark type, albeit to a lesser extent. There's also the fact that these two legendaries are technically thought of as Ultra Beasts and break the mold in that way as well. And so we get Soaring Earth, because I'll tell you now, the new legendary I'm going to create, yes create, in this video, so stay tuned for that, is going to be a ground and flying type. So definitely two opposite things, being the air and the earth. And secondly, we have the Dark Star, which if you haven't guessed by now is in reference to Necrozma. More on that later though, because part 1, The Soaring Earth, comes out first and it's time to play. The first DLC in Scarlet and Violet takes place in the land of Kitakami, a new land far away from the main region. Specifically an island that's very different from that main region. And Sword and Shield does the exact same thing for its first DLC, the Isle of Armor. Alola is based on Hawaii though, it's all islands. So just like the names, let's do the opposite. Instead of the United States' only island state, let's take a trip to its largest piece of land, Alaska. I think a small region, kind of like the land of Kitakami based on Alaska, would be the perfect DLC destination for Sun and Moon. There's a lot of places in the world that deserve regions based off of them, a lot more than just singular states of America. We already have 2, Hawaii and New York, and with Alaska being relatively barren and probably less likely than maybe like, California or Texas someday, this is the perfect time to include a really cool part of the world into the Pokemon world. And I know for a fact it's cool because I just came back from a very adventurous and amazing trip there, and a lot of the artwork was very reminiscent of the tribal themes in Alola, which is basically what gave me the idea for this video. Sometime after becoming the champion of Alola in Sun and Moon, you'll get a call from Professor Kukui that the people of the land of Kara-Wu have sent a distress signal, calling for the strongest trainer available to come to their aid, as they're being attacked by strange beasts. As the champion of Alola, you accept the call and a plane takes you to the land of Kara-Wu. Like I said, this would be a less developed land with its own unique feel, like the land of Kitakami. Alaska consists of thick rainforest, dangerous tundra, and freezing seas, and the land of Kara-Wu will have the same. This region is technically huge, but you'll only be able to explore small amounts here and there, since this would be playing by Sun and Moon standards, with routes and things like that. The name Kara-Wu comes from the Japanese word karasu, meaning raven or crow, and kawu, a word meaning not from this place, from the Tlingit language of the Tlingit people of southeastern Alaska. The region is called this because, to tie in with Sun and Moon, the people inhabiting the land of Kara-Wu are not from this place, but in fact from Ultra Space. Not the people there now, but their ancestors. The raven is a very common animal in Alaska, and in Tlingit culture is known as the creator deity of the world. Very important. Combining all of that information, we get the land of Kara-Wu. Once you arrive, you'll have to defeat a Nihilego, Xurkitree, and Guzzlord all in a row. The people will thank you and bring you to their village, where you'll meet the village elder. The elder will tell you that he's the last living one of his people who originally arrived in the land of Kara-Wu, not from this place, and knows he must be getting targeted by the Ultra Beasts due to that fact, though he notes that the attacks have only started since his partner Pokemon mysteriously left, nowhere to be found. For context, it's known in the Pokemon universe that those who have come from Ultra Space attract Ultra Beasts to them. This is when the Elder requests that a strong trainer like yourself explores the land of Kara-Wu in search of his long-lost partner, and that he'll gift you a Pokemon not from this place in return. You'll know his partner when you see it. It's purple with a large stinger, and with that, you'd be able to explore. Like I said, the region would consist of mountainous, snowy, rocky landscapes, lush evergreen tree rainforests, and ice-cold oceans. And will have all kinds of previously unobtainable Pokemon in Sun and Moon defined, especially ice, grass, and water types. In the middle of part of the rainforest, you'll spot the large purple figure that the Elder told you about. When you approach, it'll challenge you to a battle, and your Pokedex would recognize it as a new Ultra Beast known as Naganadel. This would be its introduction, since Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon don't exist. After it's defeated, it would reveal that it was protecting a large and injured-looking mysterious bird Pokemon, which, in its injured state, you'll be able to catch. This is again to make itself similar to the Isle of Armor and Teal Mask, as you get Kubfu and Ogerpon before actually doing things with them. The Pokedex will reveal that this new Pokemon is known as Yeater, the Earth Pokemon, a legendary flying and ground type. It's said by the Kara-Wu people that this Pokemon brings the light each day, carrying the sun in its mouth. It's believed by historians, though, that this is the Pokemon responsible for the rotation of the Earth. It flies around the Earth at 1,000 miles per hour, causing the Earth to rotate every 24 hours. It doesn't do this constantly though, it takes breaks in the peaceful and untainted wilds of the land of Kara-Wu, while momentum continues to spin the Earth for a while. It has the signature ability Earthen Plating, which protects it from all status moves. I found it interesting that Solgaleo, Lunala, and Necrozma all have armor-like signature abilities, those being Full Metal Body, Shadow Shield, and Prism Armor, so I had to give Yeater an ability to match. The name also matches Solgaleo and Lunala by incorporating the word Ter, which means Earth, like Solar and Lunar mean Sun and Moon, and mixing it with the pronunciation of Raven in the Klingit language, which I will not be trying to say. The design is of course based on the Raven, specifically that of the creator Raven, which sometimes depicts a face on the chest. Its earthen plates and helmet are created from things like stone and clay, and resemble traditional Alaskan art of the Raven, using teals and reds. The wings are meant to look stiff as well, imitating the look of wings on a totem pole. The shiny form is a little closer in color to the orange and blues used in the logos of Sun and Moon, and changes the earth-colored plates to a gold, in reference to the gold accents on Solgaleo and Lunala. Finally, the signature move I'll be giving Yeater is known as Skyquake. It's a 120 base power physical ground type move with 100% accuracy and 5 PP. However, being called Skyquake, it can damage flying and levitating opponents. For a visual, I like to think that it would be similar to Whitebeard's ability from One Piece. Yeater is the first legendary I've ever designed, so let me know what you think in the comments. I was honestly super intimidated by this project because legendaries are usually a little more intricate in design and larger in scale than I'm used to, but I honestly did better than I thought I would, though I definitely still have some improvements to make. You bring back Yeater and Naganadel to the village elder, where he thanks you for bringing back his partner, and tells you that he's met Yeater once before, and he can see that it's missing the glowing crystal it usually keeps in its mouth. He tells you the tale of Necrozma, setting the seeds for the Dark Star DLC, a being that scours the universe stealing light, and that he's sure that Yeater must have been attacked by it. He explains that 3 meteor landings have been reported in the land of Kara-Wu, and that they might be related to this somehow. You'll travel to each of these 3 reported destinations, one deeper in the forest than where you found the injured Yeater, one at the top of a snowy mountain peak, and one inside of a glacier on the opposite side of an icy sea. Let's say you travel back to the forest first, where deep inside you'll find a totem Honchkrow protecting what looks like a broken shard of a Z crystal. Defeat it and retrieve it. You'll find a totem Beartic at the top of a mountain protecting another, and a totem Wailord, which would be absolutely huge, protecting the one embedded in the glacier. I chose these Pokemon because Honchkrow is based on a crow, which lives in Alaska and is like a smaller raven. Corviknight would probably be better, but Galar wouldn't have existed yet. Beartic is based on a polar bear, and bears are also important to their culture. And finally, Wailord is based on a whale, which is also important and very common in Alaska. Once you've got the 3 Z shards, the Elder will be able to fuse them back together and grant you a Yeaterium Z crystal. With the Z crystal fixed, you'll be able to give it back to Yeater, and it will gain back its power. Following this, it flies off into the distance. The village elder gives you a Poipole for helping, as he mentioned in the very beginning, and tells you that Yeater likely went to his resting grounds, the highest peak in the land of Kara-Wu, which you wouldn't have been able to access before. You'll climb to this peak and challenge Yeater, which will use its signature Z move, Seismic Sky Shatter. Survive the attack and catch the legendary beast, and the Soaring Earth DLC will come to an end. I hope you enjoyed my prospective part 1 of Sun and Moon DLC. There would of course be trainers and items and side quest type stuff all mixed in there to give you a lot more playtime, but this is never gonna be real, so I didn't want to get too into it, just the juicier bits. We still have part 2, the Dark Star, to cover, but I will admit that the Soaring Earth is where I really got to express my creative juices. So if you want to see more of that from me, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Leave a like too if you're enjoying the video so far as well, and let's get right into Pokemon Sun and Moon DLC, Part 2, the Dark Star. The name Dark Star is of course in reference to Necrozma, which has both its pitch black regular form and bright Ultra Necrozma form. Since Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon theoretically don't exist, the second and overall larger, more cohesive, story-wise part of the DLC will feature everything that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon had to offer. You'll be told to go to the altar of the sun or moon with your Solgaleo or Lunala, depending on what version you're playing, where it'll be attacked by Necrozma and changed into Duskmane or Dawn Wings. From here on, you'll be able to explore Ultra Space and the Ultra Wormholes, visit Ultra Megalopolis, and of course battle the infamous Ultra Necrozma. Afterwards, it will still crash land on Mount Lanakila, where you'll be able to catch it. I imagine in the DLC that Ultra Space would be a lot more explorable and closer in scale to like a segmented Crown Tundra or Blueberry Academy, if that makes sense. A lot more than you could explore in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Blacephalon and Stakataka will also be new and catchable, and along with Poipole and Naganadel from the Soaring Earth, are kind of equivalent to getting new Paradox Pokemon in the Scarlet and Violet DLCs. I know that was kind of anticlimactic, but let's be real, the upgraded versions of old Pokemon games like Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon basically were DLC, just with the base game still baked in there. So if we extract all the cool new stuff from those games, you got a great half of DLC on your hands. I just had to come in and add a cool first half that involves exploring a new land. Finally, don't think I've forgotten about Team Rainbow Rocket. This would be playable in its entirety after the fight with Necrozma. And I know I said Mochi Mayhem doesn't count, but this is honestly kinda like an epilogue, so it works. And that is how I think Sun and Moon DLC could realistically play out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like I said, I try to respond to all of them. And now for the picture of the day. Here are 3 of my favorite pictures from my adventure to Alaska. And if you haven't gone, I seriously recommend it someday. With that said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Mwah. Bye bye.